Hi guys, to today's panel discussion, I'm your moderator. My name is Marcel, and we will talk about carbon tokenization. Before we start with our topic, I would like to introduce you to our panelists of today. And Sandro, I would like to start with you, and I would like to ask you briefly introduce yourself and the company you're representing today.
Perfect. Thanks for the invite, Marcel. I'm Sandro Stark, a co-founder and GP of Vanagon Ventures. We're an early stage regenerative finance fund, meaning we focus on planet positive use cases of blockchain, which the whole market of on-chain carbon credits is a huge topic where we already did some investments, and happy to be in the panel with the others today.
Thanks a lot. Sarah, would you like to be the next one?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Sarah Gottwald. I'm the Managing Director of Blockchain Founders Group. We are a startup accelerator / incubator. So we help startups, especially in the super early phase. So people can apply if even before they have an MVP, if they have a great idea, if they experience in the blockchain Web3 area. And we try to help them with everything that might be difficult if you start, especially if you start a startup for the first time. And we have a program about 3 months. And at the end, we decide whether we want to invest. And yeah, we have close to 20 startups now and happy about being part of the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Carsten?
My name is Carsten Hermann. I'm CTO and co-founder of Particular. At Particular, we're doing rating and analysis of tokenized assets with a strong focus on illiquid assets, which are very present in the whole ESG space. So, for example, with tokenized CO2 certificates. And in the past 1.5 years, I worked a lot with corporates and project developers in order to accelerate funding for carbon projects in the whole nature-based solution space.
Thanks a lot. And Maximilian?
Marcel, thank you for the invitation. Always love to talk to panelists and you about regenerative finance in the entire blockchain space. So I'm Max. I'm one of the executive directors of the European Carbon Offset Tokenization Association. In short, it's ECOTA. We are a think tank connecting bright minds on the topics in and around regenerative finance, so refi, and we have a special focus on tokenized carbon credits. We want to provide the best possible education about this young and still very much growing industry. And at ECOTA, we're passionate about the intersection of sustainability and blockchain technology. And we want to use this combination of the two to achieve a net zero future for our planet.
Thanks a lot. And to the audience, as you see, we have really interesting panelists of today, and we have a really exciting topic with carbon tokenization. I think a really good question to start into these topics is to speak about benefits. Carsten, would you like to introduce us? What are the benefits of carbon tokenization?
Yeah, sure. So in general, we have the typical benefits of like immutability and more transparency. And why is it important in the VCM? So VCM stands for voluntary carbon market, because we did experience in the past couple of years that there's a big problem with, for example, the price transparency. So lots of carbon credits are being sold for like 10 times or 20 times the price or the original price. That means when I pay today to a random resale of carbon credits, like $20 for one credit, it can happen very likely that the project developer only receives $2 of that. And to make it really transparent and traceable where the money is actually flowing to, and also to increase the trust in this kind of investments, blockchain can help a lot to make it transparent, but also to avoid that we have the double spending. So right now it happens a lot that the carbon credit is being accounted for the carbon balance of a certain country, but also for a company who bought it maybe locally, and also a company who bought it like internationally. So it's not possible right now to identify if this credit was used multiple times. And I think when we introduce blockchain to the whole space, we also have much more possibilities for the future, like cooperation between different systems, between different projects, but also to introduce something like blockchain native carbon credits, maybe something we can speak about later. But to make it short, this makes it possible to really bring all the certification, all the measurement data on the blockchain and have like a continuous process of issuance instead of only having like the issuance at one point with an estimation. So we are progressing to like a live issuance of carbon credits. And yeah, let me know if we want to tackle it at a later point.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Maximilian, points from your side to add. what's the feedback from the market regarding benefits? And do you think everybody in the market at the moment understands what are benefits of carbon tokenization?
So first of all, it's always hard to talk after Carsten and answers any question of the VCM, so I cannot add anything to that basically, but let me drive this point home. So it's the transparency one in terms of price and also in terms of data contained on a carbon credit that is very much enhanced with blockchain technology. And it's also, if you look in a couple of years into the future, connecting project developers directly with the buyers. So right now, if you issue a carbon credit, there are a couple of actors involved in the value chain, in the life cycle of coming up with the carbon credits. Thinking about blockchain, what is blockchain good at? Cutting out the intermediaries. And this is very simple understanding of what the value add of blockchain technology can achieve in the space. Now, you asked me to play devil's advocate, and I'm happily doing this because we are a blockchain panel. But if you talk to any corporate out there and we say to them, hey, you have all of this data transparency, you can now you have the terabytes of satellite images, and you have all the methodologies written on the token in and of itself. Use it here. Here's the carbon token, buy it tokenized. Many of them, at least from my perspective, and this is also true for sophisticated businesses like banks, for example, financial institutes who are who know digital assets, for example, they either don't know what to do with the transparency, or they don't know what is, they don't have any definition of quality yet. So you dump the data on them, you give them the transparency, but they don't know what to do with the transparency. And then they probably resort to a trusted third party that has some kind of rating, for example, maybe particular, for example. So this is also something where another party can be introduced rather than cut out from blockchain technology. So I guess this is a long story short. It's blockchain right now can add another layer of complexity to the already complex voluntary carbon markets. And I think for corporates, this is a big challenge to overcome. I think it's not, I think it's something that we're working on and that we can tackle with education in the space, where it's a hurdle that businesses have to take, and that's currently holding the market back.
Yeah, maybe to add to this one also, starting with blockchain in the whole space made it possible to also introduce new kind of products. So for example, carbon-backed loans, carbon-backed stable coins, certain kinds of pools where many different projects are being combined into one token. And this actually makes it even more intransparent. So therefore, corporates hesitate to buy into this kind of product because they don't understand how is this product actually linked to the real project. And often what we see is that the token is just referenced to like a project page, but not really to a document or some kind of proof of ownership of this actual amount of carbon credits or project. And therefore, I think the technology can help us a lot, like what we mentioned, transparency and also scalability, also something like price discovery. We don't have those national borders and so on. But right now, the entry barrier is really high, and therefore, most likely, only people who come from the blockchain space do understand those new kind of products which are on the market right now.
We often ask ourselves if it's faster to build just a Web 2.0 user experience or to educate everyone. And currently I'm betting on the first one, that it's faster to increase the user or to improve the user experience, because currently no one sitting at a carbon trading desk or in an ESG department wins something on taking on additional risk, I would say. I don't know what's your experience, Maximil, talking with stakeholders, but the discussions we had so far is like, okay, yeah, we've not done it before. Where I bet or where I put some bets on is mid-sized businesses or German Mittelstand, where we could see faster adoption, I would say, because these companies probably can't afford a 15 people ESG department, and this could accelerate adoption also in some parts of the industry.
I would resonate with that. So for blockchain being like the settlement layer of the final credit, but the user experience on the corporate side would be more like a web interface, a Web 2 interface. That's what I very much resonate with. But we know that blockchain technology can be, so the architecture of a blockchain can be vastly different. It can be a permissioned one, it can be a permissionless one, so it can be public, private, consortial. We are a blockchain panel. I don't want to dive into the details, but if a sustainability manager at a corporate dives into this level of detail, it adds so much complexity that they're probably going to shy away from thinking about blockchain in any sense of integrating this into carbon credits. So it's very much on the communication part, but also I think companies that work in blockchain or work in, for example, doing ratings, have to own up to their role as a trusted third party. This is not going to be so blockchain native. This is not. We need humans at the start of the value chain who develop projects that are CO2 positive. This is not math. This is not DeFi where you can just code something. We need humans in this process, and I think we should own up to it and use the technology where the benefits can really add some value, and not try to bring everything on chain right now in the market where we don't have any demand for purely Web3 based transactions in the MetaMask, for example. So this is sort of like my view after talking to the value chain.
Mm-hmm. I think one point that you mentioned as well was education in B2B business. If you speak about large business or middle-sized business, I'd like to ask Sarah, what's the best approach to educate from a startup perspective, B2B businesses, also big companies? What's the best approach for that?
Oh, well, so the first thing that de facto comes to my mind is refi talents, but I think there is somebody who can tell you more about it. For example, Carsten and Sandro, because they are kind of working on that. So I think in case you don't know, Frankfurt School of Finance has some great talent programs. I mean, I'm not sure whether, so this is more in the B2C direction. This is not B2B, but maybe let's start with that because it just came to my mind. So for private people, it's easy to do some programs to learn on their own. For companies, to be honest, there are I know some startups working exactly on those cases. So for example, it's not refi specific, but for example, we have a new startup, and what they are basically doing is they're working with blockchain and AI, and their customers are any kind of companies that have a blockchain product. And what they do is exactly what you told. They are taking care of the education part. So every blockchain company that has a new product can go to them and ask them whether they help them with the education, and they create content based on what the company gives them, all the information, also edit or work together with AI. And so I think because you just tackled that question, I think it's super hard at the moment to really find the right sources. So it's not that easy to answer that. And for example, this is why I think that startup I just mentioned might be a great idea, because it really can help to bring knowledge to people, because there is not the one source to go. And so maybe somebody else has some amazing sources, but I think it's a lot of work to do. And especially for companies, they are kind of used to get the perfect content, but in the Web3 space, it's still hard. So there is no the one and only perfect fit solution.
Yeah, and something I experienced when I talked a lot with corporate clients in very different sizes, that they're pretty much overwhelmed about what they need to fulfill in terms of like the new laws that are falling into place now and kind of reporting needs they need to fulfill. But also they are very anxious about buying credits from a project which might not be the best project, or might be then at a later stage, few weeks later, being described as a bad project in the overall media. So they're very fearful about it, and I think that's where we can add some benefits using blockchain, because we can also make the whole interface and everything much easier for them to read and give them the proofs about the project. So really link what's proving, how can we provide like the basis for the estimation of the amount of carbon credits, and why is it a good project, what are the side benefits. And using IoT sensors, for example, it's possible to get really data from the location on site. And I think education can go in many different directions. One thing is like really on project level, why is it a good carbon project? But the other thing is also how can this help my company to become more sustainable? And I think the more data we can add to a project or then to a token in this means here, the easier it will be for corporate to understand it very quickly and to take some work away from them. Because I see it's just too much. They have to learn too much about the technology, about the projects, about the regulations, about their internal policies. And therefore, they are really like all the sustainability managers, or most of them, are just overwhelmed with the amount of work that's coming to them.
Yeah, I want
maybe quickly. Just sentences, especially from corporate companies, it is expected that they know what they do, and the press is writing about them, and so it's like it's hard because people expect that they know what they do, but sometimes it's hard to find the right sources, and especially what you just described. So yeah, true point.
And I wanted to add one point to this. So blockchain technology, blockchain in and of itself is a rabbit hole, and the VCM in itself is a rabbit hole. Now, if you were to draw this into a Venn diagram, now this is obviously a biased panel. The thing in the middle would be large, but out there it's not large. And I think what Sarah and Carsten already elaborated on is, if you load and the entire complexity of the voluntary carbon market and add to this the complexity of the blockchain industry, and now go to a sustainability manager and tell them, hey, this is all of the transparency. Please figure out what a definition of quality is and what you want to do, and whether that aligns with your sustainability strategy. I think this is right now it's too much, and probably you don't need the blockchain education anymore in like 5 or 10 years, because it can become something. I think Sandro, you mentioned this, like a settlement layer that works somewhere in the back, but you as a corporate don't have to educate yourself about, okay, what is a consent mechanism, for example, or do I need to install a wallet and have the word split up between my CFOs and all of this, right? So maybe this is the way to grow the market, reducing the complexity on the blockchain side and focusing more on whether that can help the challenges in the like regular voluntary carbon market.
Yeah. So my hope is that we get more also big techs like companies that work in carbon accounting, for example, to embed solutions where you can see, okay, this is my footprint, and you can set it off perhaps out of existing software and have the trail inside your carbon accounting and reporting software, and the trail of the credits is just like baked into that whole process. I think these are the levers that we need to go down, because if we start also like explaining how digital MRVs incentivize communities with a token to verify projects, you can stop basically at that point explaining, and hiding and baking the complexity of it into existing processes or reporting tools. I think this is something where we need to focus, and where we also look for investment opportunities to bring more institutional adoption in it, and also of course finance, because we only get more finance in the voluntary carbon market if we also have the buyer side that trust into the new process. And that's why I think we won't have as much time as the blockchain or crypto market had, because the last few years it was like the whole crypto market was in kind of a pre-seed stage where a lot of investment was on hopium. Yeah, it's going to be big. And now we got the bear market again, and people get a bit more reluctant, say, now we're in this quite for some time now. Where are the use cases? And I think in refi, we need to be way faster. We won't have the time of the last few years to grow and mature that market.
And it's also, what's the big fear everyone has of all the corporates? Greenwashing. So they all fear that it will be in the media about greenwashing. And I think in the carbon space, we can also learn a lot from the whole renewable energy space, which is already operating for a little bit longer. And therefore, a couple of years, it's already the case that green electricity is basically proven using the blockchain to see, or to have like a sensor directly in a windmill park or directly connected to a solar panel, and it's written on the blockchain which power is generated by this specific device in a green way, and then it can be traced where this amount of energy is being stored, because very often it's being stored through 6, 7, or 8 resellers. more agents. And then in the end, it's really hard to see, okay, was this really generated in a green way? But using blockchain, you can now trace it from every party to every party, and therefore it becomes very transparent. And this is something which is currently being implemented in the carbon space as well. And then we don't need to argument, hey, it's blockchain and it works in this way. We can only give them like the benefits. So they can really trace down what's happening. It was sold for this and this price from seller A to B to C. And then I think we don't have to bring in the terms blockchain, Web3, tokens, and so on. We just operate with the actual result from that technology.
Carsten, did you already experience other discussions if you talk about digital environmental assets, because they sound way more harmful than tokenized carbon credits? And at least in my bubble, a lot of people start using digital environmental assets as their wording. Does it change something on the customer side?
Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, when you come up with blockchain or tokenization or crypto, everyone is having like any kind of crypto scam in mind, and it's really hard to trust. When it's about digitization, everyone can really recognize, okay, it's just in a digital way. It's more easy to transfer. It's more easy to trace it. And it's just something like when I digitize my photos, for example, so it's nothing that's harmful in any way. So it's a good point, because it really depends on which terms you're using, and then you can see a different reaction on the corporate side or with the person you're talking to.
Well, maybe to end this on a high note for the blockchain part of it, I mean, we are talking about traceability, enhancing the integrity of a carbon credit, but I mean, this is a blockchain panel, and I'm from a blockchain association. So you could also think about the enhanced interoperability, for example, of a carbon credit, integrating it into DeFi, for example, getting a backed loan, programming a stablecoin based on carbon, for example, to drive our whole financial system on carbon. These are some things you can think about in a hyper tokenized world, but clients don't, or especially buyers, don't want to think about it right now. They want to think about how can it make it more transparent, how can it drive integrity. But for all the blockchain Web3 natives out there in the audience, there is a bull case for it after we implemented these kind of use cases on carbon credits.
And
let me just use maybe that point of time to address the audience. So we are now 20 minutes in. I think in the next few minutes, it's really interesting to talk about the whole market and maybe about regulation. But if you, from an audience perspective, if you have any type of question, please type it into the chat and we will address it at the end of the panel discussion. So Carsten, I think I interrupt you, so please go on.
Yeah, I mean, it was just adding to what Max said and really see, okay, which new opportunities do we have? And when it comes to native on-chain carbon credits, something I mentioned in the beginning, there we have really something I would call like a bull case, because the carbon credit is not going anymore the route through a centralized certification body where the project developer relies on the capacity of a team of a couple of people, and they then do the estimation and check all the documents and give you like a 70-page report afterwards. Now we are coming up with this case that the project developer can directly sell to the corporate client, and it's all completely on-chain. So all the information about the project, about the measurements, about the quality, about the certification, and therefore it becomes much more faster, also cheaper for the project developer. So the project developer can also launch much more carbon projects in the same amount of time. And blockchain is being used much more, and there's more. There are more commodity type of products coming on-chain. And I think this will grow the whole ecosystem. And what we see now with carbon, I'm really convinced about, will also come in much more other sectors of the whole ESG space, and also out of that, when we think about tokenized shares in companies, tokenized green bonds, what we have already, blue bonds as well, tokenized shares in real estate projects, and so on. So what we're doing now is, I think, the groundwork, something like early adopters are doing. We are proving one case, but in the background, we can already see that in many other industries, blockchain is being used as this new public and decentralized database to transfer this kind of assets or ownership rights.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you just mentioned is super important, because what we are experiencing at the moment from a VC perspective is that the voluntary carbon market was kind of the starting point for the refi space. I mean, the whole refi space as itself, with the name of refi, it doesn't exist that long. And so I think the voluntary carbon market was kind of the beginning of everything, but now people want to see more to expand that space. So it needs to be more than only the voluntary carbon space or voluntary carbon market. And so especially for startups, if they do focus only on that, we see sometimes question whether the niche is too small and too tiny. And so we definitely need to have startups working in that space, but we kind of need to have them a little broader view to extend what they are doing and not only focusing on that space. I don't know whether you have a different opinion on that, but this is what I see, that sometimes we see, say, the space is like I said, too small, too tiny, and we need to broaden it a little.
Yeah. So what I like, what I observed is when we position ourselves as a pure play refi fund. So the segments of open finance interconnecting with climate and impact. And we saw now twice that our startups got follow-on investments either from large climate VCs or from large finance fintech VCs. And this is interesting because then for me, this is also a bull signal for the startups, because they're growing out of their niche and getting broader adoption, so that also other sector-specific VCs look at them. And what you also see is it all started with the very, I would say, like crypto mindset, like just building DAOs and working on the digital carbon infrastructure. So where it all started with Klima DAO, Moss, Reach networks, then the whole financing solutions on the VCM with a Solid World and Flow Carbon arrived. Then we had the marketplaces. Now we're seeing a lot of digital MRV solutions, not only in forest, but also for farming and soil integration. And what I now also ask myself, so what is part of the tokenized carbon market and refi? Is it like, how much blockchain is there, as you said, Maximilian, how much blockchain is there? Or as we did ourselves, we did 2 investments that are more like in a AI field and use satellite data to verify project, because we saw the need in the value chain. And I see that more and more, so that startups are breaking out of that pure Web3 play and say, okay, it makes sense at some parts of the value chain, and at other parts it doesn't make sense, but they still count themselves to the larger refi community. And I think this is the whole power of this space, that people out collaborate the legacy players, I would say, in long term at least. I've never seen such a hyper-connected, friendly community working with each other. And I think this is something really special.
Super fascinating.
Full stop.
Full stop. Carsten, I think you mentioned at the beginning regulation, and I see in the chat a few questions to that as well. Can you give us a brief overview about the space in Germany, Europe? What are the regulations you're addressing, or maybe you are handling at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this can be on 2 different levels. One is more like specifically for the whole carbon accounting space, but I think it's more towards the blockchain space here, right? So like regulations towards tokenization. So right now on the market, and there are over 250 projects or companies that are tokenizing assets. What I can see is, or experience, that many of them are not aware if they're actually selling a utility or a security. And I did by myself the whole process with the BaFin, which is the German financial authority, to get the approval for a utility token. It is something that really takes a long period of time, like over half a year, 8-9 months. And it's really crucial to do that because I would say 80% of tokens that are being sold on the market about carbon projects are like in fact security tokens, but they don't have an approval or license about it. So for me, as a possible buyer, as a corporate, also as a financial investor, I have the risk that I buy now a token which maybe becomes invalidated or becomes zero value because the company will be closed. And what I know from the financial authorities, that's not only in Germany the case, and I think in general in Europe or even worldwide, is that they know about it, but the market is still too small to really do something about it. So they're more watching it, and when it becomes bigger and bigger, then at some point they will step in, and then they will ask the right questions, and will also do or act in terms of the consequences. So I think there's a big lack of knowledge in terms of what are we actually selling as a utility or security. And every project you can see out there where you can buy like a share of a whole project, then it's definitely security, and it's in most cases not registered. There are some, and I think it's good that in Europe with the MiCA, we have now regulated space here coming up, because this will be also the foundation for professional investment. So in other parts of the world, it's not regulated yet, and therefore it's so risky because no one knows how it will all develop. But here in Europe, I think it's very good for startups right now to work in compliance with the new regulation, and therefore build products that are really future-proof and are made also for institutional investors. And I think that's also the problem right now, that everyone wants that professional institutional money to flow into the space, but we haven't been able yet to give them the right frame and the right products. And this is something that is really coming up now. Therefore, it's really great to see that the European Union is here progressing in such a good way. And I assume that most of the other nations in the world will adopt lots of the parts of the regulation we are releasing here. And then we will be able to have like this kind of harmonized space. And then also institutional investors will jump in.
To quickly add from a VC perspective, I totally agree on everything you said, but especially to add, so it's like the first time, or it didn't happen quite often, that Europe is way further than the US. And especially at the moment, a lot of VCs from the US and business angels are really interested in investing in Web3 blockchain startups in Europe because of the current situation with MiCA. So it really helps, and this is from a VC's perspective a really positive situation. And I'm not sure how fast the US is in catching up here, and so we should really use that advantage that we are currently having.
Let me really drive this point home, because I think so. Let me kick you an example. For example, on the German market right now, without the MiCA, I've talked to a lawyer, for example, about carbon credits. And they told me carbon credits in the voluntary carbon market are unregulated. So if you have a carbon credit integrated in a general perspective, you are not captured by any regulation. But if in Germany, for example, you now go ahead and tokenize this unregulated carbon credit, now the token, just the token, becomes something we call in Germany Kryptowert. I don't have a translation for this, but it becomes a regulated financial instrument for it. And then you can become, so an unregulated carbon credit can become regulated if you tokenize it. So this adds to the entire complexity that blockchain can bring to a carbon credit right now. I see this also changing with the MiCA, what Sarah said. But right now, I mean, MiCA isn't coming to effect until I think in 1 year. I think it's not in effect yet. So it's really complicated and adds to the entire complexity of integrating blockchain into this. And I don't think corporate buyers don't have too much clue of what they're doing with tokenized carbon credits. And I don't think they have too much motivation to look into this another layer of it and adding another layer of complexity to it in talking months to lawyers how they can view a tokenized carbon credit from a regulatory perspective.
Super interesting. I think another topic that's really interesting is the investor perspective. Maybe Sandro, can you give us a few insights if you talk to other investors? What are maybe the pain points for them? What kind of education is maybe needed on the investor side, maybe on the private and then on the institutional investors? Please give us a few insights.
Yeah. So with the carbon markets, we have always like two different kind of investors. So the startup VC type investors that want to invest in the ecosystem, and investors who want to trade carbon credits as a commodity. So from my perspective, I'm more in touch with the first category, like VCs that want to invest in the ecosystem. And we are there. It's a small field of people that are working closely connected. These are individual investors and also some micro funds that are operating in that space. When I talk with people who are not in that refi bubble, I think, as I mentioned before, it's always that is the category going to win, or is blockchain going to win, or is the climate market going to win? You also see that in investors in our fund, where we will also bring some proof in the next few months on a broader adoption. But in general, that's the first challenge, I would say, from investor point of view. So do I believe in the intersection? Our thesis says we focus on two large markets. The first is the financial market that is running on 1980s software in the back end, looks shiny on the front end, but that's the first market, which is large but highly inefficient. And the other one is currently in existence and is growing, but not able to scale efficiently until 2030, when we want to reach our net zero goals. So we see that as two intertwined categories that we believe in. Others see them more individually. And the other thing is that, of course, the whole notion of blockchain. I mean, we're in our panel and all in the Frankfurt School bubble, and understand it and believe it and dedicate our careers to it. But for others, it's just for them, software or internet companies is a category that is so tiny in comparison to, I don't know, real estate, private equity, and others. So it's also that understanding of blockchain that a lot of people think, okay, it's gone, we've seen it, it all crashed down, let's move on. AI, let's do AI, moving all to AI. But the whole complexity of blockchain, of do you invest in token, do you invest in equity, how is the regulation? There's so much complexity that a lot of VCs, they prefer the standard software as a service business models, I would say. And yeah, I think with Sarah, you mentioned it. We're launching a program called Refi Talents. It's a leadership and management program to educate people in that space. Basically, everyone in that call is contributing to that program. So we now have over 500 participants lined up on the waiting list for that program. That clearly shows interest for that category. And there are VCs that sign up, VCs and investors, corporate ESG department, decision makers, regulatory bodies. And I think, because you ask what can we do to overcome these barriers, I think this is one initial chance to bring more people into that space.
Yeah, to again add one sentence is, there are many VCs out there that do not have a blockchain focus, and for them to invest is super hard, because I see it is, but for myself, we do blockchain only, but we are within blockchain, we are agnostic, which means how should I be able to have deep knowledge on refi, NFTs, metaverse, DeFi, to name all of them? So how should a VC be able to make solid decisions if they do have even a broader focus than blockchain? And so, yeah, of course, education is key as always, but it's nearly impossible to keep up because the space changes so fast. So this is something that comes on top. And yeah, it's pretty hard to get all that needed knowledge to make good decisions.
I wanted to add one thing. Sure, we are a blockchain panel and we all are blockchain people, but if the way to scale the market is to just have a Web2 interface and have blockchain as a settlement layer, then we should own up to it. There is no nothing to gain in being dogmatic about the technology. And Sandro, you said VCs are shying away, for example, because they don't want to investigate the technology too much. I think that's fair enough, right? So I care about what the market, so especially in the voluntary carbon market, what we can achieve for the planet. Now, I think that the technology, that blockchain technology on the path to achieving something can add so much value. But if the market, and especially if buyers, I mean, we are on the supply side, right? If the buyers demand a Web 2 interface for it with blockchain just as a settlement layer, then I think this is the way to go. And then we all, as part of the supply chain, have to own up to it. This market is always right? Buyer is always right. So that could be, I think I have to swallow my own blockchain ego in this because I'm also Web3 native. But I mean, if this is what the market decides on, then we should own up to it.
Yeah. Let us go into a quick question. Let me check the questions. One question was, maybe we can answer all of those really quick, is energy consumption in the blockchain space. Can give maybe one of you maybe a short summary. Is there a question in the market about energy consumption, about blockchain? Is it a big hurdle? Let us know.
Yeah, I can give some information about this. I mean, in general, it's totally underestimated what the traditional financial system is consuming in terms of energy. And when you see the whole Bitcoin space, the Bitcoin mining space, it's actually the only industry so far which is powered over 50% by renewable energies. And there are already countries like Paraguay, for example, which is a great country for Bitcoin mining or other blockchain activities, where we have a country that is 100% powered by green energy. And I think everyone always thinks, oh, there's much more energy now being used and so on. But one dimension is really that compared to the traditional banking space, it needs much less energy and also much less offices and much less workforce. So there are actually lots of savings in terms of energy and costs. And the other thing is that renewable energy projects or renewable energy is not being used so much by traditional industries, but as we're here in a very novel industry, a very modern industry, and an industry which is really powered by people who really care about the environment and the planet, we can already see that it's much more important for everyone in this space to have like renewable energy in place. And for sure, there are lots of optimizations on the blockchain level, but also on the smart contract level and programming level to reduce the amount of energy that is needed to settle transactions, to do like operations in the space. But from what we see so far, and this is just based on the actual numbers, is that the whole blockchain space is one of the few spaces where renewable energy has such a high importance and is used so much more than all the traditional sectors. And therefore, I think increasing this sector and decreasing the traditional financial space will have definitely a positive impact.
And perhaps to add, since the shift from proof of work to proof of stake, especially on the Ethereum blockchain, and most of the projects run on Ethereum or on Ethereum scaling solutions or the Celo network, which are in comparison to proof of work or to Bitcoin, nearly neglectable in energy consumption, I would say. That discussion point also went out of the way, because it was funny when 1.5, 2 years back, when Ethereum was still running on proof of work with that high energy consumption, it was really a schizophrenic situation on trying to go net zero using an infrastructure that has a lot of uses a lot of energy. So, but I think we're basically out of the way in that terms, because on the Bitcoin blockchain in the refi ecosystem doesn't play a role yet, unless the Bitcoin community comes up with something.
Another question is, that's really interesting in my mind. How does one create a uniform trust on the minting of carbon credit? The question is much longer. It regards the value of different kind of carbon credit tokens. What's your point of view on this?
What is the meaning of the question? Can you please repeat it?
Yeah. How does one create a uniform trust on the minting of carbon credits, tokenizing it, and how do we ensure the relative value of carbon unit token in the VCM space, as each VCM project output has a different value?
Yeah, so I think it's about the harmonization of data, and there we can see, I mean, we have those working groups in place. Max, I think you're the best person to answer it here in terms of a quota, where we really discuss, or several players in the market discuss, which type of information we need to gather in order to describe or have specifications for carbon credit into place. And therefore, that's also what Sandro mentioned, that this whole community is very cooperative. And therefore, we all discuss and set together the standards for this type of data we want to record on the blockchain. And when we then see what's happening in the financial space, for example, with the Actis standard, there we have also a data standard in place that is basically giving a guideline which information we need to put on the blockchain or in the token under which naming to tokenize a financial contract. So between banks, between project developers, between carbon marketplaces and tokenization companies, there is already an active discussion about, hey, which kind of data we need to record and what's the naming, which kind of fields, which name, which type of data format, and so on. So there's something that's coming up. It's not the case yet, but also what we are doing in particular is to gather all this information of carbon tokens or ESG tokens, and then harmonize it on our platform to give some better insight and make them comparable. But in the future, it's definitely foreseeable that there will be one or two data format standards in place.
Yeah, and maybe adding to this is a great question that we get all of the time, because especially financial services players, so banks, asset managers, they think about the voluntary carbon market, understandably, as so like another commodity, right? So this is your oil market. You have your WTI, for example, if you compare it to oil, you have your North American sort of oil. There is a global market price for it, and who's the seller doesn't matter for me, because it's homogeneous oil, right? So if I get the right sort, I will get an oil that I can use. Now, the question that we have in the voluntary market, and this is why this is a very good question, is do we have, or is the long-term potential of it what Carsten just mentioned? We have a minimum data set on every project, for example, where you can compare projects between one another? Or is it more like the stocks and bond market, where you have to analyze every project in and of itself, so by itself, according to, for example, a minimum data standard? So commoditizing or owning up to being more like stocks and bonds, this is a discussion, at least from my point of view, the market hasn't done yet. But I know that buyers really much focusing on what Carsten just mentioned. They want some sort of standard so that it reduces, again, I don't know how much I said complexity in this panel, but it's one of the main pain points. So they need to have a reduced complexity, and I think a standard would help in this. So the question was, how do we ensure trust? The question should be answered in two ways, right? Coming up with, do we want a commoditized market, or do we want to have a heterogeneous markets with one's stocks and bond type projects, for example? And then coming up with a minimum data set on every project that, like Carsten just mentioned.
So I would like now to go into maybe the last question. I would like everybody from you for his or her personal outlook on the market, and because there are a lot more questions into the chat, maybe what's the best way the people can reach out to you if they have more questions. Sarah, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So reaching out, I think always the easiest way is over LinkedIn. So yeah, this is just the best way. Outlook for the market. Currently, the general, so the VC outlook is that the VCs are really still waiting. So we are in a bear market, everybody knows. From my point of view, at a certain point of time, the VCs need to spend money again. Because like normally a fund can extend the time, but nevertheless, at a certain point of time, they need to start spending money again. So what I mainly mean is at a certain point of time, the market will get some more money. Of course, it's not clear in which direction the money will flow. The refi space is getting more and more important. What I always like to quote is Charles Hoskinson, because he once said, the target is to align the breed of humans with a positive outcome. And this is basically what the refi space is doing. Everybody knows that the ESG is super important, and refi space helps. So I think it will get more and more important, and we will have a positive outlook. But nevertheless, what I already said, there needs to be more than only the voluntary carbon space. And so I think this is like the next step, going out from only focusing on that and like extending the possibilities.
Thanks a lot. Sandro, what's your personal outlook?
Yeah, so what I see in the whole community is that the business models get, on the one hand, more I would say crypto native, like implementing carbon credits in DeFi protocols. So this is great for people who love playing and tinkering around with the more crypto native stuff. But on the other hand, we see that large institutions also dive into that. I recently posted about the blockchain for scaling climate impact report from the World Economic Forum. Konrad Adenauer Stiftung just released a paper on Web3 to solve the climate crisis. So there's way more focus on that community from the outside, as we think, especially also from the blockchain strategy paper of the German Federal Ministry, where blockchain and ESG plays a major role in. And I still believe these are the two opportunities of our decade, and we keep betting on these, and I also think others will. Of course, for startups, they have to bring a bit more to the table when it comes to adoption and traction in comparison to last year. But it's still very possible to raise good funds for startups today. And best way to reach out is LinkedIn.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot. Maximilian?
So I'm a consultant. I'm going to give you a consultancy answer. It depends. It depends whether we in the voluntary carbon market can come up with scalable customer solution and don't be dogmatic about the technology and about the supply side. So if we can come up, that could be, and we talked about this, blockchain technology, Web3 being the settlement layer, and the final solution that end consumers use are Web2 based, for example. It could also be what Carsten mentioned, for example, that the entire market moves on-chain and we build up the resources and capabilities at the buyer side so they can assess or come up with a definition of quality and can assess projects and can assess the enhanced transparency that they are getting from on-chain carbon markets. So my gut feeling is the former, but it's for me very hard to think even 3 years in the future, because blockchain moves so fast, VCM moves so fast. Now I can draw up the Venn diagram again. Coming up with the outlook of the combination of both is very hard. So, and this is the perfect bridge to how you could reach me. I would suggest you enlist yourself into the refi challenge so we can talk more about this, and you can learn about how to navigate both markets and the intersection of both markets. So that would probably be my last take.
That's a really great idea. And Carsten, what's your outlook?
So outlook and also my personal conviction is that the whole market for illiquid assets will be tokenized. Everything will be moved on chain in the next couple of years, maybe 3, 5, 4 years. And this also includes ecological assets. So I think tokenized ecological assets with the right standards will become a commodity. And what we see with the likes of BlackRock to start the first crypto projects or crypto products, let's say it will still take a few months until everything is approved on the market, but we will definitely see institutional money going also into the tokenized asset space, and this will ultimately drive a lot of funds into ecological assets. So that will happen sooner or later, but it will happen. And yeah, to reach out, just contact me on LinkedIn anytime. I'm really happy to answer questions or also get your input and discuss different theories.
Great. Thanks a lot to our panelists, and thanks a lot to the audience for attending. And yeah, what can I say? See you at the next panel discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marcel.
Thank you. Bye.